Okay, this is a video about something I find difficult. I've made a few videos before about it. Hopefully, I'm going to get my thinking a little clearer. I'm making this video like I do for many videos for myself as well as you. And the subject of this video is when you have more than one debt issue, like just about any bigger project in the world nowadays, if you have a multilateral debt issue, a debt issue from one bank and another bank and another bank. And if the debt issues have different debt tenures, and you want to sculpt all the debt issues, and you want to apply the same sort of sculpting patterns to all of the debt issues, how do you mechanically do this? And I came up with this kind of idea to have two big points, a capture debt issue number one, and number two, compute the debt IRR. Now, when I reviewed this, I found I was a little wrong. There are many ways to do things, and that applies to this subject. So here's what I'm going to do. Let me just introduce it. I'm going to go through this business of debt IRR that I seem to be obsessed with, but maybe I shouldn't, because you can also do the same sort of thing with a goal seek. And I'm going to start by just demonstrating how we can do it, achieve the same sort of result to introduce sculpting with only one debt issue. You notice on these pages I only have one debt issue. And then I'm going to move to the multiple debt issues and demonstrate, I've got a little X lookup here, and demonstrate with two different debt issues how to resolve this issue where one of the debt issues has a different tenure than the other debt issue. And the problem in this case, in this situation, if you use a goal seek, you can resolve the problem without debt IRR. I think I suggest you still need to, or can, let me put it this way, can use the capture debt issue and non-capture debt issue. And then I'm going to show you the method that I use or suggest with using debt IRR and how you can set the model up. Now, the reason I'm doing all of this is I'm in the middle of really trying, in a very serious way, trying to come up with a technique where you have an extremely flexible user-defined function. And this user-defined function just requires a few little inputs from your model, and then you define kind of different reports you want, and different outputs you want, and different techniques for sculpting, and it'll plop out and do all of this sculpting for you without and resolve the goal seeks and resolve all the rest of the circular reference. And so I'm really trying to work on this and get this into a kind of straightforward way thing. Here's the example of the report. So let's go through this. Okay, I'm not going to go through the UDF this time. What I have to do, and one of the biggest advantages for me in wasting so much time on these UDF, is to really force myself to make these simple kind of illustrations and get the thinking straight. So let's put some cash flow here. Let's multiply this by 1.03. Let's put a really high growth rate in, okay? It looks like, okay, I have generic macros, and I've already used the generic macros to forecast this, and I stuttered a little bit, okay? And let's say we have a 1.3 DSCR. So we just do, I'm not putting the 10, right now the debt extends for the cash flow period, and we're getting this. Now, when we the big trick in sculpting, in any kind of sculpting, when we have different interest rates, and I left this one so I can change it from 5 to 7 to 4, oops, is coming up with a debt balance that leaves the closing balance 0 and does a little sculpting for you. Okay, not that big a deal. In this case here, I suppose the interest expense went up, and so when the interest expense went up, the debt service went down. And to do this, you need a NPV of the debt. Now, in this case, instead of we can compute the NPV of the debt in a couple of ways. Number one, I use this technique where I just take a compound interest rate, a discount factor that changes. We just compound the interest rate from the last period, and then we compute the sum product. That's just when I take the cash flow, the debt service divided by the interest rate. You just get the amount of the debt. So I could use this amount of the debt, and then I could put for the repayment is just the debt service minus the interest, and the interest is the opening balance. I will always use the opening balance in these examples. Okay, and you should probably use that in your model. Now, if you get this, another way to do this whole thing is to put a minus on the amount of the debt you computed from the varying balance, and then just get the whole debt service from up here, okay? And then you can get the debt IRR, and there should be some obvious way to explain this, but if the IRR and the NPV kind of produce the same sort of things, so this IRR is the number that makes the present value of this stuff 0, and if you just use the forward debt service and instead of taking the last one, you can get the same result with the debt IRR as you can with the varying IRR. Hopefully that's okay. I've tried to make this video a couple of times and I keep failing. And I'm trying to explain some basic kind of ideas. So idea number one, the big idea. Let me perhaps put it here. You can compute the same debt NPV, debt service. How about debt service NPV with debt IRR and sum product? Now, there are a whole bunch of things. I happen to be a kind of believer in this thing. When you have an LLCR has multiple debt issues with different tenors. That's another really kind of complicated little thing to do. And I suggest computing a rolling forward debt IRR to get the NPV of the cash flow that you compare to the amount of the debt. Okay, I didn't explain that so well, but whatever. Now, you could also do this in the same example. Okay, I put some different interest rates. All right, and we can get our total debt service. And right now, you see this is a fixed amount. And this fixed amount leaves something of a little bit of a problem. This is how I used to do sculpting. God knows how many years ago, but we set the closing balance to 0 by changing this opening balance, and then we put all the things together, and then we can take that goal seek amount and put it into the same formula. I put it into get the IRR from that one, and then you can get the same final result using the debt IRR. So this is really an intermediate thing, and we can take the difference between, we can take the final, and I used to do this fancy, where you look for it with a lookup or something like this. This is the closing amount. And now let's do the same thing. Let's do this thing that I strongly suggest you do. This is CB Sculpt. We'll set that to 0 by changing this one, and let's put this. That's closing balance. Let's put open balance sculpt. And I hope I'm typing it slowly enough so you remember how to do that. So now let's start recording a macro, and I'll put it sculpt goal, something like that. Okay, whatever. And I say whatever too much, I think. So once we have the macro on, let's go to the data and go to what if analysis and go to goal seek and set the closing balance to 0 by changing the fixed amount. Okay, and now that's kind of a pain, and it solves the problem. And I'm going to stop the macro, and we'll go and look at the macro just for a minute. What did I have it? I called it sculpt goal seek or sculpt goal. Okay, and let's, while we remember it, CB sculpt, OB sculpt. So we set, and I don't know why that does that all the time. It puts the little things here, and we'll change the OB sculpt. Please get out of here. I'm making a video.
Oh, video.
Okay, sorry about that. Embarrassed by these people around me. My God, now I'm losing my train of thought because I'm an old man, too old to be doing Excel anyway. Okay, let's change the rate here. Make this 4%. Then we have a difference, and of course we can put this in, and that's another way to do it. Now the reason I'm doing this is once we get to the multiple debt issues, we could, oh great, see, OB sculpt, changing CB sculpt, range CB, OB, yeah, okay. No, range set the C, Jesus, hell am I doing? Okay, apparently I hadn't pressed Shift Control F3 on this to make that work. Okay, so that's our second method, and nothing very illuminating then. It's just a different way to do it. Now let's get into the real issue. Now I've made two different debt issues, and we want to sculpt both of the debt issues. And when we're finally finished, let's put a little graph here. And let's go and get our numbers. And now let's put our CFADS in and see what we're doing. I hope this helps a little. Okay, and then we're going to go back and let's put capture debt service. Okay, so we've got two different debt issues, and the capture debt issue has this kind of debt service, and then the other debt service has the interest plus the principal. I hope we have a debt service here, and this has a shorter tenor, And then when we'll make a graph, when I make a graph, I try not to get too fancy. Control F1. Why does it? I don't know what I have in this file. Somebody made it all fancy. Let's change the chart type. Let's make it, start by making it an area chart. It looks a little funky. And let's make sure that this top one, the CFADS, is just a line. And these ones better be a stacked area. Okay, there we go. And so what happened when we do this analysis, they're both sculpted, okay? And let's how about let's do something else just so very clear about this. I suppose I can leave it like that. Where's the CFADS? Let's make this suddenly go down to 80 or something. Our tax depreciation finishes. And let's make this go up to 130 because we have some idiotic merchant price. And what happens is both of these are sculpted. Okay, so this debt service is not flat. We don't put a flat debt service here. Let's make it really gigantic. So you can see that both of these debt services go down when we do that. Now, I think I'm not ready here because I didn't make a goal seek, so we're going to have to put a little goal seek button here, which I don't seem to have put in yet. Okay, now what I'm going to do is show you how to do this one with a goal seek method, which you might like best probably, and then a debt IRR method. And in this method, we don't even have to really worry about the debt IRR. So we have two different interest rates. I'm going to make this one interest rate suddenly go up to 10%. How's that? We'll be able to change any of the interest rates, and we can make this go to 9 or to 7. Okay, and see kind of how much we have to sculpt this debt. So this debt is the capture debt. So the first thing to do is figure out which debt has the longest tenor. We can just put a maximum of the two tenors for now. And then we can use XLOOKUP, and I'm going to start using XLOOKUP for everything. There's no reason. Maybe it makes models heavier. I hate this heavy model shit. And then we can just select this one, oops, and then select these ones. Can I do that? And then you can put a comma, and you can put a match model and get an exact match. I think I did something wrong. Equal XLOOKUP. Okay, we're going to take this 10, look it up on these two things, and then get this thing back, and then put a 0. Okay, and it tells you it's 10 or 1. So if this was 7 and this is 10, it would be 10 or 2. Okay? And you can use this XLOOKUP for all sorts of things. 7, sorry. Okay, now I'm not finished with this. In fact, we better put a check of the model. We better put a closing balance check. Come on. I'll use XLOOKUP again for that. Okay. So we start with the same sort of thing. We start with an aggregate debt service coverage ratio, and as always, the debt service is simply the cash flow divided by the DSCR. And then we'll go through we first go through the non-capture debt service, and this is just our normal kind of compound factor. And then we have our little flags here, okay, for the 7 and the 10. And we can take the amount of the debt, the cash flow, multiply it by the flag, and then once we have that, we can get the NPV of the CFADS, not the NPV of the cash flow, the NPV of the CFADS. And then I say, okay, well, let's just take that number, and then here is where the circular reference and the goal seek comes in, because we need the total. If we could get the total debt, and we don't know the total debt yet because that depends on issue number 1. But if we could get this total amount of debt, then, and I think perhaps this total amount of debt, which is all the way, let's see where it is, just a minute. Oh, I got it from here. And I think I'm gonna put a minus on the goal seek debt multiplied by the percentage of the debt that we want. Okay, that's the debt number 2 is the non-capture debt issue. And then, whoops, and I don't need a minus this time. And then we can say, well, let's take the kind of the DSCR or the LLCR, whatever you want, but that's the NPV of the cash divided by this, and we use this principle, that if you have perfect sculpting LLCR without all the adjustments to the LLC, of course, without all the DSCR adjustments and what have you, that is equal to the DSCR, and then we just take and divide that. Okay, nothing all that special so far. And then we put our opening balance, and because of the way we computed this LLCR, mathematically the NPV of the repayment, and the repayment is the total debt service minus the interest, that will go down to 0. That, I promise you, will go down to 0 by the time you finish paying off the debt. Well, not exactly 0, but who's counting that little thing? Okay, so that's that one. But the only problem is that we didn't have the total amount of the debt. Now, to get the total amount of the debt, we go to the next one, and I always seem to have to rewrite this formula. If you have multiple debt issues and one capturing debt issue, you can take the capturing debt issue, and I got this wrong. It's cash flow divided by DSCR minus other. I'll put DSO. Okay, so if we had this is why I computed the non-capturing debt issue first. We subtract that amount that we've computed, and this could be 10 different issues, and this gives you the amount left over. And then we put our then we get our sculpting, and when we're all finished, the sculpting will all work, except for one enormous thing here. Right here, we don't have a proper closing balance. So why don't we do this? Let's do our little X lookup test. Okay. And we'll put equal X lookup, and just pretend you're using old lookup. Just pretend you're using the old one, and go up, and on this one we have the 7 tenure. We click on the whole amount of the period, and we click on that, and we get something very close to 0. And then let's kind of put a round of this, of course. This comma 0 equals 0. And oops, I didn't mean to put minus, I meant to put equal. And we got our first test, and let's do the same thing for this one. Okay, and then we put our CB test, and we use the same XLOOKUP. This time we'll use our capturing debt issue. We can even use it from here, I suppose. And we'll, again, I'm just putting this, and I'm just deciding right now to throw away lookup and use XLOOKUP. And of course, we'll do the round. This time I can say, of course, I think, equals 0. Okay, and now we can put our closing balance check as and this one, comma, this one. Now I did the same thing in the next one, so I'm sorry about wasting your time a little bit on that. We don't need this debt IRR. We don't need any, oops. This number comes from the, let's take this number as the total here multiplied by the 40%. Okay, I hope. And then what we do is excuse me for making that little error. Oh, shoot. Just a minute. This one, somewhere, where did I put my total debt? This here. Excuse me, I should be turning the video off right now. Okay, I'm just taking everything out. Everything we don't need. Now, we're going to compute the debt service on this first issue. And you notice that when I multiplied it by the goal seek, it didn't give me the same amount. And then we'll put the debt service on the second issue, and that comes from above. That's fine. And then we get the total. And then now we need to put the difference between what we're computing. No, let's just do this. It's much easier to do this. Let's just make sure that that difference equals 0. So let's just do the same thing. This time I'm going to do it. I'm going to be stupid again and make a macro, but this time I'm not going to bother with the range names. And I should really, I'll do that afterwards. Don't worry, I'm not being so bad. And then we go to data, get a goal seek, and set the difference to be 0 by changing our big number at the bottom. Okay, and I better stop recording this. And now we have this one going down to 0 and that one going down to 0. And we can do this whole thing with this little goal seek technique. So if you have multiple issues, this is one of the ways to solve it, with a little goal seek. And, you know, I'm embarrassed to say I'm so obsessed with this stupid UDF thing I'm building and really, really trying. But as long as you set up the capturing issue, as long as you kind of set up these two issues, you can solve this problem with this one. And let's put a button in here. And I have no idea. Does anybody remember what I named this? I think I named this. Was this macro 2? I have no idea. Oh, shoot. No, it wasn't macro 2 because macro 2 is blank, so it was probably macro 5. Unless I can't remember naming it. So, okay. Sure. And that's totally wrong. Ah, crap. One more time. How about macro 3? Let's cut it and watch me embarrass myself so badly. Okay, so now let's Let's make this one 3%, okay, and run our macro, and then we have it, okay? Not so bad, not so bad. Now, let's do the last method. Now, I'm not going to move things around, but I think what I probably should have done really is to put all of these debt issues, this NPV of the debt issue at the top. I'm not going to do that because I didn't name the range. So now I'm going to show you another technique, which is just an alternative. And we take the debt issue number 1 and the debt issue number 2, and I'm not going to make my little graph, okay? And the difference between this technique and the other is you don't have to run a goal seek. Instead, you can use a copy and paste macro, which perhaps you could have done with the goal seek. Somebody can yell at me and say, oh, no, you could have done that with the goal seek. Now, what I do here is I say, okay, first, let's get how much we have from how much debt we have from this capture issue, and from the non-capture issue, we multiply the debt by the percentage again, and then we can get the total, okay? That's what we do first. And then we take that total and put it against all the debt service, and we compute a debt IRR. Now, the problem is that it should be almost makes you get kind of shake and shiver with the circular references, because this number, the IRR depends on this number, but this number is going to drive this number is going to drive the total debt here, and this total debt is what drives issue number 2. So we have this horrible kind of little circular reference, not a bad one. So I made a copy and paste, and I just copied and pasted it down here, and then we get our test to be true. So let's just review. Issue number 1, get the NPV of the capture issue. Now, what I'm going to do, Hetty has really helped me with this so much. And we've completely changed this whole UDF issue, okay? And what we've done is we've made the ability to put this in. So when we add another debt issue up here, we're going to be, I'm not kind of explaining, we have a little bit of a sources and uses of funds statement, and we'll allow the debt sizing from the DSCR or from the debt to capital, or from a minimum of both, and that's important in a lot of the renewable energy and frankly other things where we might have the DSCR driving the amount of the debt, or might have the debt to capital, and you might have a P90, and things get really kind of complicated. And then what I'm going to do is we have the ability right now to insert a little thing right here, where we put the little table in here, and then when we put the little table in here, we can get the debt IRR and have this really be a parallel model, and have you, I'm going to set it up, of course, as a template, but you might want to change things, of course. And when you change things, you can just go and modify all of these reports and get them all formatted and everything else, and then just link them to the places of your model that are causing the circular reference, and then you don't have to run any goal seek or any copy and paste macro or anything else. So that's, of course, the idea. Of course. Okay. Shit. Okay, so where were we? So again, we put the I'm repeating myself, but we get the NPV of the capturing debt issue, and that NPV of the capturing debt issue is the interest rate factor for the capturing debt issue, and we take the sum product of that and this whole thing where I did it incorrectly here again. okay, minus the DS. So that we get that number and we compute it. And so the NPV, and maybe this is really horrible because my rule is that you should be able to press the F2 and see exactly where you got this thing from. So that's a little bit bad. Maybe I should have computed it down below there. That's okay. And then this is kind of almost what causes the circular reference. We add them up, and then we put that negative amount and use that negative amount to get a debt IRR, but that causes a circular reference. So when we compute the NPV of all of the debt, which is back to this one, we can use that debt IRR. So that's a different approach, okay? And you can just use a copy paste, okay? Now, if we put the first thing we do is exactly the same, okay? You take the NPV and you take it at the issue number 2 interest rate. So let's make issue number 2. Let's make that go to 10%. How about to 20%? Let's make it go. Okay. I had a little problem with the video, and I think I can close this one very soon, I hope. Okay. Then, so we computed the NPV of the CFADS, get the amount of the debt to, which I've already talked about, get this LLCR/DSCR that gives you a constant number and gives you the closing balance. Put the test in here using, I use lookup still. I hadn't converted fully to X lookup yet. Okay, and then we get the closing balance of the interest. And this, now notice that this all works. And this 307 comes from the sum product. So the key is to compute. You need the debt IRR to compute the overall debt. You use the sum product and the interest rate to get the amount of this debt. The amount of this debt comes from the total, which comes from the debt IRR, but the debt IRR needs the total itself because it's negative here, and that's where you go around and around. And that's the method that I'm using in the UDF. Now, there are about 3 or 4 other things in sculpting that can get really quite a little complicated. And what I am trying to do, and I think I'm just about there, is for these things with multiple debt issues, maybe even with different currencies, with sometimes you get the, the fixed amount of debt, not the varying debt, and you have to compute these curved DSCRs. When you do all of those kind of things, there are a whole bunch of different options for the sculpting, and to manage all those options and then do the sculpting for P90, P50, debt to capital, and optimize the whole thing, it gets to be a little bit painful. Or I shouldn't say a little bit painful. I call this a very, very big pain point that might even exist in a relatively simple solar model. Okay, so that's my video for today, I think. And I'm gonna stop this one. How do I stop it? Stop it.